So he certainly would have been sensitive and very judgmental to any way the parents dealt with anything. It would have affected his behavior and his projection. But as he would do things that pushes, he's identifying, what am I going to do? Who do I have to impress? Who do I have to talk to? Who do I have to see? What do I have to do? Where am I going to belong? So it's sensitive to try and do things with other people. But his impressionability is almost too strong to be on the sports team or on other things, seeing how people react. And when people aren't reacting well, he wouldn't have the tolerance to tolerate it. He would see it. But being able to write or publish a book back then, this is days before radio or TV, getting a book was a really huge accomplishment. So he got it, he studied, he went out, he got to school, he got his degree. He's smart, he got his degree, determined. Then he got jobs working in his practice. And then he started building up his ideas of psychotherapy and building out those ideas. And then he wrote a book on dreams and self-analysis. And there's his book. And it's still standing as the best book, the most referred to book about dreams and analysis of dreams to this day. So you see the Leo up there. That Leo midheaven is ruled by the sun in the 7th house. It's partly there, a good relationship that he's proud of, and having other people be proud of him that he relates to. So the idea of relating to him, if he's relating to, even though he has this private intensity, he would want to be special in relationship, but he would want the relationship, he would work hard to be the best in the relationship. You wouldn't be able to fault him. He would want to be the leader or the teacher of the relationship. Depending how well he did as the leader or teacher of the relationship, his sense of self-worth or appreciation, the Taurus on the descendant ruled by the Venus, would set in. If he's appreciated, he would work really hard, the Venus in the 6th. If not, it would almost make him sick or very unhappy. And then he'd have to try and think about what's making him happy, why, get some knowledgeable point about it. Then it would come out again. So this is his cycle of angles. Now, I don't want to take any longer on this. He's an interesting character. We could easily go in, spend more time into him. But we're going to leave it here. Pull this up to the years we're going to work with. Okay. Now, before, this is our last class, and before I go to we got our Saturn cycle to look at and our 8-year graph to look at. But before we do this, I want to show you something. It's the reports that are done. Let me just pull up the Wind Star. I'll show you how to get these reports. If you're not going to take the time to do all the 8-year graphs or the Saturn graphs, there's a couple of reports you can get in Wind Star that come close. I think the Saturn one's fine, but often the one that does the outer planets, it gives a little more, even the Saturn one, it gives a little too much information, gives you everything well organized, so you can look at the sun to the Saturn, Saturn to Saturn, Saturn to the sun, and Saturn to the Saturn across a lifetime, but it includes everything else. And that's fascinating, but it's almost too much information. You're better off not working with all those other things until you get this anchor of what's going on with these 3 main cycles worked out. So when you're doing this, let's pick up his, do I have it in here? Yes, okay, so here we go. We have Freud's chart. We go into a search, and we go into this, we go like we're going to do a transits. It comes up. Okay, now under the reports. It's under the reports. There's several reports. We can use the Saturn transits for 30 years. This will give us a Saturn cycle. This is a report I'm talking about. The Saturn cycle for 30 years. It'll give us a report that gives you Saturn for the whole lifetime. It also gives, you can also do for one chart, yearly transits. You can do this for a lifetime, and it gives you the cycle of the outer planets, how they affect each other. So it gives you what we use as an 8-year graph, but puts it across a whole lifetime. And you can do that once and keep it in a file, and you have it done for that person. So I want to show you each of these. I'm not like, if I put, oh, I did the progress scan, sorry, I did the wrong one. Mercury retrograde, okay. If we take the Saturn transits of 30 years, it comes up like this, it looks like this, and goes along, and I'll have it done, so we'll come to it on there. And the other report is the yearly transits and progressions. This is for one chart, this is for 2 people. So we could have done it for Jung and Freud, but we're not using it as synchronicity. We're going to do this one right now. And if we can start it with for this year, we can go back and start it from the birth. And I back it, and I usually go 2 years per page, and I put it for 50 pages for 100 years. Boom. And that fast, in a second or two, we've got a calendar of all his outer planet aspects, all the 8-year graph aspects for his whole lifetime. Okay, so these two reports, this is why I suggest WinStar. It's not organized. You can get this information in other programs, but it's not set up so conveniently. Okay, the only difficulty, so here's, okay, I'm going to come out of WinStar now. That was going into the search engines, clicking on, going to do a transit or search, and then you go in and like you go in to get your transits, and it sets the transits up. So I have the thing that does a 2-year search first, immediately for for Mars node, but then it's up under reports that you see the yearly transits and then the Saturn transits for 30 years. These two, they'll take care of you working with anybody's charts for your 8-year graph and your Saturn cycles. So, and then the other one is just when you're in this matrix search report, we have the thing to do a 2-year thing from Mars and out. And then it comes up with just the squares and oppositions. And I have the semi-squares. So, but it gives the hard aspects for the planets from Mars and out to the inner planets. So it gives you something to work inside the 2-year period and more detailed than just the 8-year graph. Okay, now I'm going to turn this off. Here's the Saturn graph. I haven't worked it. I just run it off to show you. But at first, if you're doing it for a certain date, I had the date for 1855 started from his birth date. So it put what the main aspects were going on for the next 10 years, right, to what it was going to hit. But then it talks a little bit about the Saturn cycle, how it's 4 phases, and then it gives you the aspects. Here's the sheet. It gives you it gives you a year, the month. It gives you a 10-year period in each year. Then inside each year, it has the age going down in blue. Then it tells you Saturn to Saturn. The aspects of Saturn to Saturn are the first column. The second column is the house Saturn's transiting through. And the next Saturn is Saturn to the Sun, the squares, oppositions, and conjunctions of Saturn to the Sun. Then it puts Saturn to the Moon, Saturn to Mercury, Saturn to Venus, Mars, Jupiter, to Uranus, to Neptune. It puts them all out here. And at the end on the right, you go Saturn to the midheaven and Saturn to the ascendant. So what we're using is Saturn to itself, Saturn to the Sun, and Saturn to the angles. So the first 2 and the last 2. Or the first 3 and the last 2. So the first 1 and the last 2. Oh yeah, and the Saturn to the Sun. But the other ones fill in the gaps so you can work with it. It has everything. But really, if you're going to work with this, you really want to concentrate first time through on the Saturn to Saturn, the Saturn to the Sun, when the conjunctions, the oppositions are, and then Saturn crossing the angles. You don't see it in the phases in the same way, but it gives you the dates clear enough to see what years or when they're going through it. You can see here, he had the Saturn going over his ascendant here. So when is that? That's 1866, 1867. So if he went back to his early, 1866, 67, 65, he entered secondary school and he graduated, but he's in school then, but nothing else really said about it. But it's just something to show you. We're working with our Saturn graph. This gives you more information, and it's the reason I don't use it, because I don't want to be distracted pulling into all the other things until I can use this later, but I want to see the Saturn to Saturn, Saturn to the Sun, and Saturn to the angles, and get the cycle and the phases of where someone is across a lifetime to have it work. Okay. So, yeah, and when we're doing the 8-year graph, this does it. You can go along on it. It does it for each year. So if we're going to look up at 1916, 17, no, 1912 is what we were working at. We're looking at 1912. You'd have the aspects. You could highlight them and stand them up, but you'll notice it has Pluto to Saturn aspects, and sometimes we'll have Saturn to Neptune or Saturn, and ones we're not using in our primary things. So not everything there would be what I consider main places, but they're all the ones that are there. So I would highlight their Saturn to the Sun, Pluto to Saturn, Pluto to Saturn, Saturn to the midheaven, Saturn to Mercury. So it gives you that. You can highlight it, and you can also write in on the side what's happening in their life at these times. So you get the history put in there, and as we do that, it's filled in for a lifetime. So for family members and building a genealogy or history, this is great. But for working with it, it's invaluable. It's organized in a way someone else can relate to. Look at their chart, they're seeing it, they're seeing these, what's this mean, what's this mean? And you're walking right into it. You don't have to be proving it, so you're seeing the times and you're talking about them. It works fine. So this will save on all the time. We're just working specifically with the 8-year graph. Well, I probably hand drew, like, when I just had the graph and I'm writing them in using ephemeris, using the 100-year ephemeris or 200-year ephemeris, just writing them in, this would still take 15, 20 minutes to do. For me doing it on the computer, it takes a couple hours to do, because I have to put the dates and get the aspects and put everything in. But it's here. I did thousands of these, and it developed my ability to sift through what's more important, what's not, what's there. And I cut it down. Even here, I prefer it to the personal planets. I don't put the aspects to Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. I put from them going in, affecting a person. But this basically is the same thing with a few extra things coming in that you can ignore or highlight the things you want out of it. But it lets you record the data beside it, which is really useful for going back over. You do it once, you see someone 10 years later, you still have the information where you left off. Okay, so just a few notes about working with astrology with this. Okay. So I'm not going to belabor the whole chart, but we're going to look quickly. His Saturn down at the bottom here, and this is the old style, my Saturn graphs, the seashell Saturn graphs. But you see the Saturn as the edges of the shell. Then the sun's put in, then the moon squares. The angles are put in, and then dates are put in on it. In this case, his sun's in the 7th house, so his sun is near the descendant, just like Young's sun's near the descendant, and so when his sun and the angles, they're not too far from each other. They kind of go 1, 2, 1, 2 every 7 years. They build around, and then you can see the above or below the horizon. The sun starts in the 7th. It's going to go forward. It's going to conjunct the Saturn at a young age, and it's going to build up to the midheaven when he's still just young. 1869, wrong number there, 1869, and 1869, it's not really, he's in school, but he's doing well, he's accomplishing things he set up in school. But by 1866, 65, 66, the Saturn has moved along and come down to his ascendant. So he has the identity crisis. So the world he grew up in is caving in, and he's having to find, who am I? And he's not even 15 yet. 66, 50, 60, 86, 85, 86. So he's 19. Is that right?